My name is Joanna. 24 years old, a job at an insurance company that pays just enough to cover the electric, water, and internet bills with a little left over for the essentials. And that's about it. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the house running. If I hadn't stepped in last winter, the heater would have stopped working. I don't think they even noticed. On Christmas Eve, I came home after my shift still wrapped in my thick coat, the faint scent of coffee clinging to my sleeves. The Christmas tree sat in the corner, lazily adorned with string lights that had seen better days 3 seasons ago, probably. My mother, Diane, placed a plate of ham on the table. Her movements slow, deliberate. My father, Harold, was already seated at the head of the table, holding a wine glass, staring at the ceiling light like it held the answers to his life's questions. Dinner began in a heavy silence, the kind that presses against your ribs and makes every breath feel like a struggle. The clinking of silverware was the only sound, punctuated by the faint Christmas carols spilling from the kitchen radio, a sad attempt at holiday cheer. I scooped mashed potatoes onto my plate, trying to ignore the thick tension. Tyler, my younger brother, sat across from me, his face barely visible under the shadow of his unruly hair. He was 17 now, old enough to sense something was wrong, but too young to do anything about it. And then, just like that, the calm broke. My father slammed his knife down onto the table. The sharp, sudden sound made me jump, a cold shiver running down my spine. "Joanna," he said, his voice low, deliberate, as if each word was an accusation. He locked eyes with me. "You're a burden. You can't live here anymore." The room froze. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. I stayed still, my hand frozen midair, the fork clinking softly against my plate. My mother let out a dry laugh, too quick, too forced. She was trying to pass it off as a joke, but there was nothing funny about it. My father's stare never wavered, his expression as cold as the winter wind outside. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as if the walls themselves had closed in around me. Tyler stopped mid-motion, his fork suspended in the air. He stared at me wide-eyed, his face painted with disbelief. He didn't understand. None of us did. None of us. I slowly set my fork down, the metallic scrape of it against the plate, a harsh intrusion in the otherwise dead silence. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You heard me?" My father replied, his voice lower now, but no less firm. "You've stayed here long enough. This is my house, and I'm saying enough is enough. You need to move out." I couldn't speak. The words didn't make sense. I didn't stay here because I had nowhere else to go. I could afford my own place. I could live independently, but I stayed because they needed me. Dad lost his job 3 years ago, and Mom only worked part-time at the library. Without my contributions, they couldn't keep things going, and now on Christmas Eve, they were treating me like a freeloader. Mom opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, Dad cut her off. "I've made my decision." Tyler's eyes flicked between them, his voice breaking as he spoke. "If they can kick her out this easily..." He stopped, looking down at his plate. "Who's next?" I didn't want a scene. I didn't need to shout or cry. They had made their decision, and so had I. If they wanted me gone, I would leave, but they should be ready for the cost of that decision. I leaned back in my chair, staring at them both. My father smirked slightly, like he'd just won a silent war in his head. My mother kept her head down, silent. Stunned, maybe, or maybe just numb. I got up and carried my half-eaten plate to the sink. I couldn't stand another minute at that table. Before leaving the kitchen, I turned to Tyler and gave him a small nod. He was the only person in that house I cared about. No words were exchanged, just a quiet understanding. The clinking of silverware continued, but the sound seemed hollow now, as if no one had an appetite. I went upstairs, closed my door behind me. I didn't need to make a scene. I just started packing my clothes. No tears, no complaints. They wanted me out, so I'd leave. But they would feel the weight of it. The heater would go silent tomorrow. The house would be cold, not just in temperature, but in every sense of the word. I closed my bedroom door with a soft creak. The sound of the hinges, a quiet, final goodbye. I wasn't thinking about arguing or begging. I wasn't going to make excuses. They had made their decision, and so had I. No announcements, no explanations, just action. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed. I opened my closet and began folding my clothes. Every shirt, every notebook, every little trinket I had bought with overtime pay. Each item packed away silently, a small piece of me leaving with it. This room, which once gave me comfort when the world felt too heavy, was now just a shelter for someone no longer wanted. Just as I folded my last hoodie, a soft knock came at the door. "Joanna." Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. "Did you lock the door?" I walked over and opened it. Tyler stepped inside, shoulders hunched against something colder than the winter air outside. His eyes were red, but Tyler never cried. At least not in front of me. "Are you really leaving?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I nodded slow and steady. "They said it, didn't they? And I have no reason to stay." Tyler sat on the bed, glancing around the room, now empty void of the life it once held. He looked at me, his voice barely audible. "But if you go, who's going to pay for the electricity, the internet? You know, they can't afford it." I met his gaze, my heart heavy, but my resolve firm. "That's not my problem anymore." I didn't answer immediately. Tyler wasn't stupid, he knew, and that terrified him. I wasn't just his sister anymore. I was the lifeline this house clung to, the one thread holding everything together, even if it was unraveling from the inside. "I know," I said softly, "but I can't live my whole life as a walking wallet." "Tyler, I deserve to breathe too. I deserve a real life." His silence stretched thick and heavy before he whispered, "I want to go with you." I froze. "You can't," I said, gentler than I felt. "You're still in school. You're still a minor. They won't let you leave." He didn't look up, his eyes glued to the floor, his hands clenched into fists like he was trying to hold on to something he couldn't see. "Then what about you? Where will you go? Who will you stay with?" It was a good question, one I didn't have all the answers to. But I exhaled, steadying myself. "I'll stay with Marissa for a few days. I've saved enough to rent a small place." I always had a plan, even if I hadn't expected to use it this soon. Tyler looked down at his lap, the tension in his body palpable. His voice cracked as he spoke. "They don't deserve you. They don't know what you've sacrificed." I moved to sit next to him, placing a hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of his words and mine. "It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is you don't get dragged down too." I could see the conflict in his eyes, the pain of realizing that life as he knew it was slipping away. But I couldn't fix it. "Not yet. Just hold on a little longer," I said, my voice softer now. "Once you're old enough, I'll help you get out, I promise." He nodded slowly, his expression tight, as if he was committing my words to memory. "You'll still text me, right?" "Every day." I smiled, a quiet promise passing between us. "Every day." As he left the room, Tyler glanced back at me. There was something in his eyes, a look that twisted my chest. A mix of sadness and something worse. An awful realization that from now on, he would live with two people who no longer acted like parents. The door creaked behind him, and I continued packing, checking every drawer, every corner, making sure I left nothing behind. The weight of the suitcase in my hand felt different now. I wasn't leaving just a home. I was leaving the ghosts of all the years I'd spent here, all the hopes I'd silently carried. By the time I placed my suitcase by the door, it was nearly midnight. The house was silent. Dead. The kind of silence that only happens when no one is really home, even if the bodies are still in place. I pulled out my phone and logged into the bill accounts. My fingers moved with a calm precision, removing my banking information from each one. Electricity, water, internet, all of it. The credit card I had opened for Mom to help her. Closed in less than 10 minutes. No warnings, no explanations. I had given them those for 4 years, and they hadn't listened. Not once. As I wheeled my suitcase down the stairs, I saw the living room light glowing through the crack under the door. But no one came to see me off. No one called my name. No apologies. I could even hear the TV still playing, the Christmas program flickering on the screen as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't just been cast out like some unwanted thing. I opened the door. The freezing wind hit me, biting sharp against my skin. But I didn't shiver. Instead, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk and slid into the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. I knew one thing for sure. My life would no longer be dictated by anyone else. This Christmas night was the beginning of a life I truly deserved. I drove away from that street, away from the house that had imprisoned me for far too long. There was no snow falling, but inside me, I was frozen. Not from the weather, but from something much deeper awakening. I had once thought I was helping my family, but now I understood. I was enabling their dependence. And in return, I had been stripped of everything. My future, my peace, my sense of self. I arrived at Marissa's apartment close to midnight. She lived in a small 2-bedroom place just 10 minutes from the office. When she saw me standing there at her door, suitcase in hand, and dark circles under my eyes, she didn't ask questions. She opened her arms, pulling me into a tight hug. "Stay as long as you need," she said. Without hesitation, she led me into her living room where I would sleep for the next few weeks. The next morning, as the sun rose over the old brick houses, I sat at Marissa's small wooden table, my laptop open in front of me. The soft hum of the world waking up outside did nothing to ease the storm inside me. I logged into the utility payment portal, clicking through the accounts. My name was still listed as the responsible party. I clicked the remove button. A pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to leave this account? After removal bills will no longer be automatically paid." I confirmed. Then the electricity, the internet, the water, every system I had been silently funding for so long. I removed my credit card from every account they had used, including the Amazon Prime account my mother used every night to stream movies, oblivious to the sacrifice it took to keep it running. For them, my support had become an entitlement, but now they would finally understand the value of what they had taken for granted. I leaned back in the chair, my breath slow and steady, not out of satisfaction, but because for the first time in years, I had done something purely for myself. No more bills to pay. No more being financially exploited under the guise of family duty. The next few days passed in rare peace. I went to work on time, had dinner with Marissa, and read before bed. Her small apartment was simple but warm. More importantly, nobody yelled at me for wanting a life of my own. It felt like I had slipped into some parallel universe where my choices were mine again. But peace, like everything else, was fleeting. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was organizing files at the office, my phone buzzed nonstop in my pocket. 5 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and 1 text from Tyler. The power's been shut off. Dad's screaming all over the house. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I had cared too much for too long. And that was the problem. An hour later, another message came through from Mom. "Joanna, what's going on? The internet's down. The TV won't turn on and your dad's furious." "What did you do?" I read the message without a shred of guilt. They wanted me gone. They shouldn't expect me to keep funding the home that no longer had a place for me. That night, while Marissa and I were preparing a simple dinner, my phone rang again. I wasn't going to answer, but something inside me, an instinct, maybe compelled me to pick up Joanna. "I don't know what's happening." Mom's voice trembled, full of fear and confusion. "The power's out, the bills haven't been paid, and we can't even watch Netflix anymore." "Who do you think has been paying for all that the past 4 years?" I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. Silence, then Mom's voice soft, almost guilty. "You, but your father thought?" "Exactly. I cut her off. My patience running thin. You believed what Dad said. Now both of you need to live with your choices." I hung up. At the time, I thought it was over. At the time, I assumed once the services were shut off, they'd adjust, but I had underestimated Dad's dependence and his pride. The next day, I received an email alert from the bank. Suspicious login attempt from an unfamiliar device. My stomach sank. 3 failed login attempts, followed by a password reset request. One name came to mind. Dad. I called Tyler. His voice was low and tense. "Joanna, I think Dad's trying to get into your bank account." I saw him holding Mom's old notebook where she wrote down the passwords, Tyler added. His voice strained. I gripped the phone tighter. "Thanks, Ty. I'll take care of it." I sat down, my fingers moving swiftly, changing every password. Bank accounts, emails, streaming services, even food delivery apps. Layer after layer of security went up, each one a silent message. I was no longer the obedient daughter they could control. I thought that after updating everything, activating 2-step verification, and removing all access, it would end. I hoped they would learn to fend for themselves. But I was wrong. My family didn't know how to live without someone to blame, without me to target. They spiraled. 3 days after I left, Tyler texted during my shift. "Internet got cut off this morning." Last night, Mom had to cook on the gas stove because the microwave's dead. This morning, Dad punched the fuse box. I didn't reply. I simply put my phone down, took a deep breath. I knew that house was sinking into chaos. I knew this was just the beginning. That night, leaving the office, I saw 6 missed calls from Mom. By the 7th, I picked up. Her voice was hoarse, crying, confused, furious. "Joanna, what have you done? The house is dark. No TV, no hot water. Your dad's losing it." "What did you do?" I answered calmly. "I only turned off what I was paying for. From now on, you can take care of yourselves, right?" "You can't do this," Mom shrieked. "This is your home," I said, pressing my lips together, steadying my voice. "No, it's the place where Dad kicked me out," I replied. "Remember, I'm just following orders." Silence. Only the sound of heavy breathing came through the line. Finally, she whispered, "Your dad thinks you're trying to get revenge." I let out a dry, exhausted laugh. "No, Mom, I'm just living my life. What bothers you," I said quietly, "is that I'm no longer living it for you." I hung up before she could say another word. I didn't need to explain anymore. They were used to my silent endurance. Now they would have to get used to my silent absence. The next morning, another alert from the bank, suspicious login attempt, possible fraud blocked. I didn't have to wonder. The only person desperate enough to hack into my accounts was Dad. I immediately called Tyler. His voice was full of worry. "Joanna, I think he's digging through Mom's old notebooks. He keeps yelling that he needs to get back what belongs to the family." I closed my eyes, feeling a painful tightness in my chest. "Did you see him using the computer?" "All morning?" Tyler whispered. He keeps trying to log in, cursing. When it fails, he's saying weird stuff like, "That girl thinks she's one, and I'll make her regret it." I chuckled bitterly. Good. At least the alerts were working. Tyler's voice dropped to a low murmur. "Joanna, he's starting to say weird stuff, like that girl thinks she's one, and I'll make her regret it." I let the words settle. He was desperate, and I was his target. But I wasn't going back. Not for them. Not for anyone. A knot of fear twisted in my stomach, the kind that clings to you with cold, gnawing fingers. I gripped the phone tightly, my pulse hammering in my throat. "If anything strange happens, lock the doors and call me immediately," I instructed Tyler, my voice low but firm. Got it," he replied, his voice strained but determined. "I'll keep my phone with me all night." I hung up. Then turned back to my bank account, tightening security even further. I blocked all foreign devices. Changed the password again, this time. 16 characters, long packed with special symbols, and linked everything to fingerprint verification. No more loopholes. That night, I didn't sleep well. An unease settled heavy in my chest. A sense that this wasn't over. And I was right. The next morning, just as I stepped out of the bathroom, I heard Marissa's voice calling from the living room. "Joanna, someone's banging on the door." I rushed out, my hair still damp, and saw her tense face. "Who is it?" I asked, my heart already beginning to race. "I'm not sure, but he's pounding hard." I crept to the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. My heart dropped when I saw him. It was my father, standing there, fists hammering against the door, eyes bloodshot. His voice echoed down the hallway. "Joanna, open up. You think you can just walk away?" I stood frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a vice. Marissa looked at me, panic in her eyes. "Are you calling the police?" I nodded, already dialing 911, as the call connected. I stood there staring at the shadow outside the door and thought, "You pushed me out of your house. You don't get to force your way into my life now." As I pressed the phone to my ear, I could hear him still shouting, hammering at the door. "Joanna, you think you're so righteous? You think leaving solves anything?" Marissa trembled behind me, clutching the door key, but frozen in place. I gave her a reassuring nod, then turned back to the phone. "Yes, he's my father," I said, my voice steady but cold. "But he's threatening me and trying to break into my friend's apartment. Please send someone." The dispatcher's voice was calm. "Officers are on the way. Stay inside and do not open the door. They'll arrive in 3 minutes." I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest, but my hands steady on the lock. Through the peephole, I watched Dad pacing the hallway, muttering to himself. His fists still pounded on the door, each strike more frantic than the last. "Ungrateful!" I heard him shout, his words cutting through the thin walls. Marissa whispered behind me, "This has gone way too far." I nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I know, but he needs to understand. He has no power over me anymore." The sound of sirens pierced the air, and red lights flashed down the stairwell. I heard the heavy footsteps of officers running up the stairs, their boots striking the concrete like a promise of change. One officer knocked gently on the door. "Police, open up." "Stay calm." I opened the door, stepping aside to let them in. The officers entered, speaking firmly to my father. "Sir, you are disturbing the residents and causing a public disturbance. We need you to leave immediately." Dad turned to face them, his face flushed red with fury. "She's my daughter. I have the right to talk to her." One officer's tone remained even unwavering. "Not like this, sir. Your daughter called us because she felt threatened. If you don't leave immediately, we will have to act according to the law." "I'm not going anywhere," he roared, suddenly lunging toward me as if trying to force me to listen. My palms clenched, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. For a moment, I thought the world had stopped until the officers moved quickly, restraining him.
"Sir, please maintain your distance. She owes me,"
he shouted, his voice twisted in rage.
"She has no right to treat me like this. I'm her father. I have rights."
That sentence, the one I had heard so many times before, echoed in my mind like the final blow. I have rights. For years, he had used those words to impose control, to manipulate, and trap me in a life that wasn't mine. But today, I wasn't the 17-year-old girl sitting at that dinner table, trembling with fear at the next outburst. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, clear and firm, "I owe you nothing. You chose to push me out of this family. Now you will have to live with that choice." The officers placed their hands on his shoulders, instructing him to turn around. The cold click of the handcuffs seemed to ring out louder than anything else. I saw the look in his eyes as he was led away. Not the look of a father, but of a man who had lost control of everything he thought he owned.
"Joanna, you will regret this,"
he hissed, his voice filled with venom.
"You will pay for betraying your family."
I said nothing. I just stood there, watching him being led away. The weight of the moment settling into my bones. For the first time in my life, I felt free. His furious shouts echoed down the long hallway, each syllable vibrating in the air like a lingering storm. When the door finally closed behind the officers, the silence that followed was deafening. Marissa stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "Are you okay?" I nodded, though my throat was tight. "I'm okay. I just didn't think it would come to this." "You did what you had to do," she said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Sometimes you have to be strong enough to walk away from the things that hurt you the most." I sank down onto the couch, my hands trembling, a storm of emotions whirling inside me. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Dad got arrested. I stared at the message for a moment, my heart sinking, but oddly relieved. I quickly replied, "Yes, but don't worry. Stay put. If anything happens, call me immediately." I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether Dad would be released soon or if he would try to come back. But this time, I was ready. I was no longer the obedient, silent Joanna of the past. I had walked away from the life that held me captive, and I wasn't going back. I thought that once Dad was taken away, things would calm down. But I was too naive. Just 3 days later, I received a text that made my palms sweat. "Sis, your car is parked outside our house." It was from Tyler. My stomach dropped. I immediately called him. "Tyler, are you sure? My car's still parked at Marissa's?" I added quickly. "I know, but this morning I saw it right outside our house," Tyler replied, his voice shaky. "The window's slightly down, and there's a coffee bag Mom usually uses inside. You should come see." I didn't need to hear more. I jumped up, heart racing. My car should never have been there, not after I'd taken all my personal belongings with me. There was only one possibility: my mother had stolen it. I called Marissa, needing to confirm the one thing I hadn't thought of yet. The spare key's still in the drawer at my place untouched," she confirmed. That meant they had a copy of my key one I didn't know about, and now my mother, the one who had acted pitiful and desperate for help, had secretly taken my car. Without another word, I drove Marissa's car back to my old neighborhood. As I turned onto the street, I saw it. My car, the dark blue sedan with the familiar plates, parked quietly in front of the house. But quiet didn't mean innocent. I pulled over and got out, walking toward it with slow, deliberate steps. The door handle was dusty, but inside the driver's seat, there was a water bottle, unfamiliar shoes, and a grocery receipt dated 2 days ago, with my mother's name on it. I clenched my fists, fighting to stay calm. I called Tyler. Are you home? Yeah, you're here. I'm outside. I said, Where's Mom? In the house. Just came back from the grocery store. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I'm coming in. Stay upstairs and don't get involved. Okay? I rang the doorbell. The door opened, and there she was. My mother, hair tied back, clutching a small black purse. Her face tightened when she saw me standing there.
Joanna, why are you here?
I looked her straight in the eye.
You took my car, didn't you?
She scoffed lightly, stepping aside to let me in.
It was just sitting there unused. You weren't driving it, so I borrowed it for a bit.
Borrowed. I repeated the word, tasting bitter. I let out a humorless laugh.
You've been driving it for a week.
Buying gas with whose money? And why is the driver's seat reclined, like someone's been sleeping in it? She turned away, placing her purse on the table without answering. I stepped further inside, my gaze scanning the room, the laptop I had left on the bookshelf. Gone. Where's my laptop? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. She froze, her eyes darting to the spot where it had been. Then, in an even tone, she said, I sold it. No excuses, no apologies.
For money.
I asked, already knowing the answer. You needed to buy medicine for Dad, and this house needs so many things. You don't live here anymore, so anything you left behind is just left behind. I stood there for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air, like poison. Slowly, I pulled out my phone. Then you'll have to deal with the consequences. I'm calling the police. Her face twisted in panic, her voice rising. I'm your mother. You can't do this. I remained calm, my voice even. Then why can you steal my car and sell my belongings? I stepped closer, the space between us shrinking as the tension thickened. I forgave you once. This is the second time, and it's the last. I hit 911 and watched as her face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The line connected, and I spoke calmly, my words steady. I need to report theft. My mother has taken my car and sold my personal belongings without my consent. Please send someone immediately. As I hung up, my mother's panicked breathing filled the silence.
You don't understand. I did it for your father, for this family.
I just stood there staring at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing but the cold finality of the choice I had made. She was no longer my family. When the police arrived, I explained everything. I showed them the grocery receipt from the car, pulled up GPS tracking logs that proved my car's movements around the city. I made it clear I wanted my property back, and I wanted to press charges for theft. At first, my mother tried to argue, but when the officers asked her to provide proof of ownership for the car or the laptop, she had nothing. One officer turned to me. We'll instruct her to gather what remains so you can collect it. If you wish, you can file a formal theft report. I looked at my mother standing there pale, her hands shaking. She wasn't shouting anymore. The fire in her voice extinguished. She was vulnerable now, stripped of her usual confidence. Joanna, what are you doing to your mother? She whispered. I answered softly, my voice carrying a quiet but firm resolve. I'm doing what you should have taught me, protecting what's mine. I turned away without looking back. 3 days after the police visit, I received a text from an unknown number. The message was short, chilling. You think you've won? You'll regret betraying your family. I stared at the screen, my spine stiffening. No signature. No name needed. I knew exactly who had sent it. Dad. I checked the county jail records through the public portal. my heart pounding as I saw the red letters, "Released on bail." The release date was this morning, meaning he had been out for less than 12 hours, and the message had come shortly after. I immediately texted Tyler, "Dad's out on bail. Do you know who posted it?" A few minutes later, my phone rang. Tyler's voice was barely a whisper, so quiet I had to strain to hear. "It was Uncle Mark, Dad's old drinking buddy," he said. "Yesterday, I heard Dad calling people asking for money. This morning, Uncle Mark came to the house, handed Mom an envelope and left." I leaned back in my chair, feeling every muscle in my body tense. Mark, the man who once made the whole neighborhood call the cops on his drunken parties, had bailed Dad out. This wasn't just a rescue. It was an alliance, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something much worse. "Joanna," Tyler continued, his voice filled with dread. "Last night, Dad said he's going to make you feel what it's like to be pushed out of someone's life. I think he's planning something." I jumped up, the rush of adrenaline making my heart race. I rushed out of Marissa's living room. She was cooking, but when she saw my pale face, her expression shifted from concern to panic.
"What's wrong?"
she asked, her voice trembling.
"My dad made bail,"
I said, my voice tight, and he just sent a threatening message. Marissa's face changed instantly. "Joanna, you can't stay here anymore. If he knows this address..." She didn't have to finish. I already knew. "You think he'll come back?" I asked, even though the answer was clear. "Someone like him doesn't accept defeat. He'd already gotten arrested once for storming this apartment. Now he had nothing left to lose." "You have to leave tonight," Marissa urged, her voice urgent. I bit my lip, gripping my phone tighter. Part of me didn't want to leave. I had found a little peace here, but my mind was clear. If I didn't leave now, something worse would happen. I nodded. "Give me a few hours. I'll pack." Marissa gave me a quick hug, but the weight of the situation made the embrace feel heavier than ever. That evening, I called a coworker named Nora. She had once offered to let me stay with her when she heard I didn't have a permanent place yet. I had turned her down before because I didn't want to burden anyone. But now there weren't many options. Nora immediately agreed. "Yes, bring your stuff. Anytime there's a spare room, you don't need to explain anything." I packed quickly, methodically, not much. Just a few clothes, my laptop, personal documents, the most important things. The rest, I would come back for later if I got the chance. As night fell, Marissa and I loaded everything into the car. I double-checked the security system one last time. Camera, smart locks, phone alarms. Everything was set. Marissa put a hand on my shoulder. "I'll call the police. If anything weird happens, don't worry about me. Take care of yourself first." I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't say anything else as I got into the car. I looked back at the building one last time. This wasn't me running away. It was me choosing to keep living the right way. On the drive to Nora's place, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "You can run, but you can't hide forever. Family is forever." The words made my blood run cold. But as the miles stretched between me and the past, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the person I used to be. And whatever came next, I was ready. "Joanna?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I simply took a screenshot of the message and sent it straight to the police department, attaching it to my previous report. In the description box, I typed each word carefully, making sure every sentence conveyed the weight of the threat. I'm being threatened by the man who used to be my father. I no longer feel safe. I knew he wasn't going to give up easily, but I also knew something else. I was no longer the daughter who silently endured. If he wanted to make me a target this time, I would be a target that fought back. That weekend morning, I returned to the old house, the place I once called home, to retrieve what was left. I didn't go alone. A police officer accompanied me under a civil standby order that I had filed 2 days earlier. Tyler was already waiting on the porch. He held a small backpack, his face etched with exhaustion. "Are you sure you want to go in alone?" he asked quietly, as though even the sound of a door opening might bring back all the bad memories. I nodded, then turned to the officer. "I'm only here to collect my things. If they interfere or touch me, please intervene immediately." The door opened. My mother was sitting on the sofa, clutching her purse like it was the last thing she could control. My father stood in the kitchen, his gaze cold and silent. I didn't look at them. I just walked straight upstairs to the room that had been my only refuge for 4 long years. The closet once filled with my clothes was now empty. My belongings had been stuffed into 2 plastic bags. Personal items, books, keepsakes, old photos all scattered across the floor. I picked everything up and packed them into my suitcase without letting myself think too much. They were no longer pieces of home, just remnants of a life I had already stepped away from. When I came back down, dragging my final suitcase, my mother stood up abruptly. "You're not going to say anything. After everything, you're just going to leave in silence." I paused, but didn't turn around. My voice was even emotionless. "I've said plenty in the past, and you never listened. Sounds like your father's fault, not mine." I turned, looking her directly in the eyes for the first time in months. "You stayed silent while he humiliated me. You stood by when he kicked me out on Christmas Eve. You sold my belongings like I didn't even exist, and you think I owe you a goodbye." She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the floor as if trying to disappear. My father stepped forward, still full of rage. "You think cutting ties is the solution? You're tarnishing your own family." I gave a small, cold laugh. "No, I'm just living with what this family taught me. If you're not respected, don't stay." I pulled a folded document from my pocket, a copy of a restraining order petition. "If either of you sends another message, shows up where I live, or tries to access my accounts," I said, my voice steady, "I'll file this immediately, and next time, it won't just be a polite knock from the police." The officer standing beside me nodded in confirmation. "We've made a note in the record. Any further threats will be handled seriously." I turned to Tyler. "You can stay a few more months, but if it becomes unbearable, I meant what I said. Just call me, and I'll come get you immediately." He nodded without saying a word. Between us, there was a trust that didn't need to be spoken. I left that house for the last time without looking back. I didn't want to carry any more glances with me. Not from my mother, not from my father, not from the memories that had once weighed down my heart. That same day, I changed my phone number, canceled every account connected to the old address, and moved in with Nora permanently. She helped me sign a lease for a small apartment near my company. Quiet, bright, and most importantly, safe. I severed all contact with my family. No more messages. No more surprise calls. No more fear. Every time the doorbell rang, I spent the next few weeks rebuilding everything from scratch. Opening a new bank account, buying a new laptop, setting up a new workspace. Hanging up each picture on the wall myself. Every small action felt like a declaration. I had chosen this new life, and I deserved it. I knew that one day they might try to reach out, maybe through a handwritten letter, a distant relative, or some story leaking onto social media. But I also knew, this time, I wasn't going back. 2 years have passed since I firmly walked away from my old family, as if cutting out a festering tumor from my life. I'm not looking back. I've built a new life, small, peaceful, and entirely mine. But deep down, there was always one person still trapped in that house, Tyler. He tried his best. He lived quietly, enduring Dad's unpredictable anger. Mom's endless complaints and the suffocating coldness that hung over the family like a thick, unshakable fog. Every time he texted me, Tyler tried to sound okay. "I'm fine, sis. It's all right. I'm used to it." But I knew no child should ever have to get used to being treated like a burden, like an unwanted shadow in their own home. I kept my promise. I was always just one call away. But Tyler was different from me. He wanted to leave with dignity on his own terms. "I'll hold on until I'm 18, he once said. "I don't want them to say I gave up halfway." And then that day finally came. Tyler turned 18, but he didn't throw a party or post anything online. He simply sent me a short text. "SIS, I'm ready." I picked him up the next morning. His black backpack slung over his shoulder held only a few clothes, a couple of books, and a small framed photo, a picture of us from when I was in college. No one came to see him off. The old house sat silent, windows shut tight, curtains drawn, as if even the sunlight might reveal the emptiness inside. "Not taking much with you?" I asked as we loaded his bag into the trunk. Tyler shrugged and gave a soft smile. "The rest isn't worth bringing." He moved into the dorms at the community college where I once studied. I helped him with enrollment, bought him supplies, and we had a simple dinner at a noodle shop nearby. We sat across from each other, smiling like two people who had finally woken up from a long nightmare. "Do you think they'll try to find you?" I asked. My eyes focused on my noodles, unwilling to meet his gaze. "Definitely," Tyler replied, surprisingly calm. "But I'll do what you did." "Cut them off," I said, squeezing his hand tightly. "They don't have any power over me anymore." I couldn't hide how proud I was of him. It felt like a new chapter for both of us, one where we no longer had to live under the weight of someone else's control. Since then, we've stayed in close contact. Sometimes Tyler calls just to brag about a good grade, or to laugh about a weird roommate or a professor obsessed with iced coffee. But every time he calls, I hear it in his voice. The brightness, the freedom. He's no longer weighed down by anyone else's expectations. As for my parents, after Tyler and I left, everything completely collapsed. Dad couldn't hold down a job for long, constantly fighting with bosses, quitting, and moving from one dead-end job to another. Mom took a part-time position at a small grocery store, but her paycheck couldn't even cover the bills. Within a year, they were evicted from the old house for unpaid rent. The last I heard, through a distant relative, they were living in a rundown apartment on the east side of the city, an area known for high crime rates and terrible living conditions. They sent a letter to my old address, passed through someone we barely knew. Inside was a short, bitter paragraph filled with blame and a few desperate pleas. But I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say and nothing left to give. Everything I had, I used to rebuild my own life. No more debts to the past. One autumn afternoon, Tyler and I sat by the river after class. The breeze played with our hair and the setting sun painted the sky orange. He turned to me and smiled. "You know, no matter what happens, I'm grateful I have you," he said. "If it weren't for you, I probably wouldn't believe I could live a different life." I squeezed his hand and looked up at the vibrant sky. And I knew this for sure. Nothing is worth sacrificing yourself for people who refuse to change. We didn't need a traditional family. We just needed each other. Two kids who once lost their way, now walking forward on a path no one could force us off. Our story isn't just about leaving a toxic family behind. It's proof that we have the right to rewrite our own lives. Sometimes to find peace, you have to let go of relationships that only bring pain, even if they're bound by blood. Happiness doesn't come from endless endurance. It comes from the courage to stand up and choose yourself, even if it means leaving with nothing but a suitcase and a brand new hope. What do you think about Joanna and Tyler's decision? Were they too harsh, or was it necessary for their own protection? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional life stories.